Lucas Thornton rarely allowed himself a day away from his empire of businesses, but something about the clear blue skies and gentle breeze compelled him to take a break from boardrooms and deadlines. The city park, vibrant with children's laughter and the hum of life, offered a serenity he hadn't felt in years. As he strolled down the gravel path, sipping coffee from a nearby vendor, Lucas marveled at how distant this simplicity felt from his usual world of wealth and power. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted when he spotted her, Sophia. Her presence hit him like a jolt of electricity. She was sitting on a weathered wooden bench, her back straight but relaxed, her gaze focused on the pond ahead. The years since their divorce had done little to diminish her elegance. Her chestnut hair shimmered in the sunlight, and her face bore the same quiet determination that had captivated him all those years ago. For a moment, Lucas thought he was imagining her, a trick of the mind born from old memories he rarely allowed himself to revisit. But it was her. The realization settled like a weight in his chest. He hesitated, considering turning around and walking the other way. But something rooted him to the spot. Perhaps it was curiosity, or the faint whisper of unresolved emotions. Before he could decide, Sophia turned her head. Their eyes met. "Lucas," she said, her voice soft but laced with surprise. "Sophia," he replied, his tone neutral but betraying a flicker of unease. For a moment, they stood frozen in the stillness of an encounter neither had anticipated. The awkwardness of their shared history hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Finally, Lucas gestured toward the bench. "Mind if I join you?" Sophia hesitated but nodded. "Of course." As Lucas sat down, the distant laughter of children and the rustling of leaves seemed to fade. Their conversation began haltingly, with polite inquiries about life and work. Yet, beneath the surface, the undercurrent of their shared past rippled with unspoken questions. "I didn't expect to see you here," Lucas admitted, glancing at her. "Neither did I," Sophia replied, her lips curving into a faint smile. "I suppose life has a way of surprising us." The silence between them grew, filled with the weight of unspoken words. Finally, it was Lucas who broke it. "It's been, what, 5 years?" he asked, his voice tentative. "6, Sophia corrected, her gaze returning to the pond. "Time flies, doesn't it?" Lucas nodded, though the years felt anything but swift. Their marriage had been a whirlwind of passion and ambition, but it had unraveled under the strain of his relentless pursuit of success and her longing for something more grounded. "Do you ever think about it?" he asked, his tone more wistful than he intended. Sophia turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "About us?" he nodded. "All the time," she admitted quietly. "It's hard not to, especially when things ended the way they did." Lucas felt a pang of guilt. He had always blamed their divorce on circumstances, on the demands of his career, the misalignment of their priorities. But sitting here now, he wondered if he had been too quick to dismiss his own role in their downfall. "I made mistakes," he said, his voice low. "I see that now." Sophia's expression softened, but there was a guardedness in her eyes. "We both did, Lucas, but some wounds take time to heal." Their conversation drifted to memories of their marriage, the laughter they once shared, the arguments that drove them apart, the dreams that had seemed so promising in the beginning. For a fleeting moment, Lucas felt the echo of what they once had, a bittersweet reminder of a life that could have been. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the park, Sophia glanced at her watch. "I should go," she said, rising from the bench. Lucas stood as well, feeling an inexplicable reluctance to let her leave. "Sophia," he began, his voice faltering. She looked at him expectantly. "Maybe we could." He paused, searching for the right words. "Talk again sometime?" Sophia hesitated, then gave him a small nod. "Maybe." As she turned to walk away, Lucas's eyes followed her, a familiar ache blooming in his chest. But then he noticed something that made him freeze. A toddler, no older than 2, came running toward Sophia, arms outstretched. She scooped him up effortlessly, her face lighting up with a smile Lucas hadn't seen in years. "Mommy!" the child exclaimed, his voice ringing clear in the evening air. Lucas's breath caught. "Mommy?" He watched in stunned silence as Sophia balanced the boy on her hip, her laughter carrying across the park. For the first time in years, Lucas felt a wave of emotions he couldn't name, and one pressing question began to take shape in his mind. Who was this child? Lucas stood rooted to the spot, his mind racing as he watched Sophia walk away with the toddler in her arms. The boy's giggles and Sophia's affectionate responses echoed in his ears. But the implications of what he was witnessing left him speechless. He hadn't known Sophia to have children, and the timing of the boy's age made his chest tighten with suspicion. Without thinking, he quickened his pace to catch up with her. "Sophia," he called, his voice sharp enough to stop her mid-step. She turned, her expression flickering with surprise and something else? Nervousness? "Yes?" she asked, adjusting the child on her hip. Lucas's gaze shifted to the boy, who was now curiously watching him with wide, innocent eyes. The child had soft brown curls, fair skin, and a familiar tilt to his chin that Lucas couldn't ignore. Who is this?" Lucas asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. Sophia hesitated, her grip on the boy tightening ever so slightly. "This is Ethan," she said, her tone calm but guarded. "My son." The words hit Lucas like a punch to the gut. He forced himself to focus, even as his mind reeled. "Your son?" "Yes," she replied simply, brushing a stray curl from Ethan's forehead. "He's 2.5." Lucas did the math instinctively, his heart pounding in his chest. 2.5. That would place Ethan's birth within months of their divorce. His eyes flickered between Sophia and the child, and the question that had been building in his mind now burned on the tip of his tongue. "Is he?" Lucas stopped himself, unsure if he was ready to hear the answer. Instead, he asked, "Why didn't you ever mention him?" Sophia's expression grew tense, a flicker of pain flashing in her eyes. "It's complicated," she said softly. "I didn't think it was something you needed to know." The weight of her words settled heavily between them. Lucas wanted to press further, to demand answers, but the presence of the child made him hold back. Ethan wriggled in Sophia's arms, reaching out toward Lucas with an innocent curiosity. "Hi," the boy said, his voice bright and cheerful. Lucas couldn't help but smile faintly, though his emotions remained in turmoil. "Hi there," he replied, his voice softer now. Sophia shifted uncomfortably. "I should go. It's getting late." Before Lucas could stop her, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the fading light of the park. His mind swirled with questions, suspicions, and a growing sense of unease. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Ethan's story than Sophia was letting on. That night, Lucas sat in his penthouse apartment, the city lights twinkling outside his floor-to-ceiling windows. He swirled a glass of whiskey in his hand, replaying the encounter at the park over and over in his mind. The boy's face haunted him, his wide, curious eyes, the dimple in his cheek when he smiled, and the way his curls caught the light. There was something unsettlingly familiar about Ethan, something Lucas couldn't ignore. He tried to reason with himself. Sophia had every right to move on after their divorce, to build a life for herself, even to have a child. But the timeline didn't add up. If Ethan was conceived before their divorce was finalized, Lucas shook his head, unwilling to jump to conclusions without proof. The next morning, Lucas called his most trusted assistant, Gregory. A man with impeccable discretion, Gregory had handled countless sensitive matters for Lucas in the past. "I need some information," Lucas said, his tone firm but measured. "Of course, sir. What would you like me to find out?" Gregory asked. Lucas hesitated for a moment, then sighed. "I need you to look into someone. Her name is Sophia Bradford. She was my ex-wife. I need to know what she's been up to these past few years. Specifically, anything about her child." Gregory didn't flinch. "Understood. I'll handle it personally." As Gregory left to begin his investigation, Lucas leaned back in his chair, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. He hated resorting to such measures, but the nagging doubts wouldn't let him rest. He needed to know the truth. A few days later, Gregory returned with a manila folder in hand. Lucas's heart pounded as he opened it, scanning the documents and photographs inside. There it was, in black and white. Sophia had given birth to Ethan just months after their divorce. Medical records confirmed the timeline, and even without a paternity test, the implications were impossible to ignore. Lucas closed the folder, his jaw clenched. The betrayal he felt was raw and consuming. Sophia had kept this from him, kept his child from him. But why? His initial anger gave way to confusion and sadness. He thought back to their conversation at the park, to the hesitation in Sophia's voice and the guarded look in her eyes. Was she trying to protect Ethan? Or was there something else she hadn't told him? Lucas knew one thing for certain. He needed answers, and he wouldn't stop until he got them. Lucas didn't wait long to confront the matter. Days after Gregory handed him the information, Lucas found himself driving toward Sophia's modest neighborhood. His heart raced as he pulled up to the small, tidy house she now called home. For a man accustomed to solving problems with precision and control, the uncertainty he felt now was unbearable. He knocked on the door, his fist firm but not aggressive. After a few moments, the door opened, and Sophia stood there, visibly surprised to see him. "Lucas," she said, her voice tinged with apprehension. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk," he replied, his tone calm but unyielding. Sophia hesitated but stepped aside, allowing him in. The living room was cozy, filled with touches that reflected her personality. Books stacked neatly on the shelves, a soft throw blanket draped over the couch, and framed photos of Ethan smiling on various adventures. Lucas's eyes lingered on the photos. Each one deepened the ache in his chest. "Ethan's not here," Sophia said, sensing his thoughts. "He's with a neighbor for a play date." Lucas nodded, grateful for the privacy. "I know about him, Sophia. About Ethan," he said, turning to face her. Sophia froze, her expression betraying a mixture of fear and resignation. She opened her mouth to respond, but Lucas pressed on. "I've done my own digging," he admitted, his voice hardening. "You had him just months after our divorce. That means he could be." He stopped, taking a deep breath to steady himself. "Is he mine?" Sophia's shoulders sagged, and she looked away. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know how to tell you," she said. Lucas's chest tightened. "So it's true." Sophia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Ethan is your son, Lucas." The words hit him like a freight train. For a moment, he couldn't speak. He had prepared himself for this possibility, but hearing it confirmed was an entirely different reality. "Why?" he finally asked, his voice strained. "Why didn't you tell me? Did you think I didn't have the right to know my own child?" Sophia wiped at her eyes, struggling to find the right words. "It wasn't about you not having the right to know. I was scared, Lucas. After everything that happened between us, I didn't think you'd want to be involved. You seemed so focused on your career, so distant from the idea of family." Lucas's jaw clenched, anger simmering beneath his grief. "You don't get to make that decision for me, Sophia. You took away years I could have had with my son." "I know," she said, her voice cracking. "I know I made a mistake, but at the time, it felt like the only choice I had. I didn't want to burden you or disrupt your life. I thought I was doing what was best for Ethan." Lucas shook his head, his emotions swirling in a chaotic storm. "You should have trusted me," he said quietly. Sophia didn't argue. She simply stood there, guilt etched across her face. Over the next few days, Lucas wrestled with his emotions. His anger toward Sophia was fierce, but it was tempered by the overwhelming realization that he had a son, a child he hadn't even known existed. He began visiting Ethan regularly, determined to bridge the gap created by years of absence. At first, the visits were awkward. Ethan, too young to understand the complexity of the situation, treated Lucas with the polite curiosity he might show a stranger. But Lucas was patient. He brought small gifts, a book, a puzzle, a toy truck, and slowly began to earn Ethan's trust. The little boy's laughter and bright eyes were a balm to Lucas's troubled soul, and with each interaction, Lucas felt his heart softening in ways he hadn't expected. One evening, as Lucas sat on the floor building a block tower with Ethan, he couldn't help but marvel at the boy's energy and imagination. Ethan chattered happily, his small hands working diligently to stack the blocks as high as possible. "Careful," Lucas said with a smile. "If you go too high, it might fall." Ethan giggled. "That's the fun part," Lucas chuckled, shaking his head. The sound of Ethan's laughter filled the room, and for a brief moment, Lucas forgot about his anger, his regrets, and his fears. Sophia watched them from the kitchen doorway, her expression a mixture of relief and sadness. She had been nervous about letting Lucas into Ethan's life, but seeing them together now, she couldn't deny that Lucas was trying, truly trying, to be a father. Later that night, as Lucas prepared to leave, Sophia walked him to the door. "Thank you," she said softly. Lucas frowned. "For what?" "For making an effort," she said, "for being here for him." Lucas's expression softened. "He's my son, Sophia. I'll always be here for him." Sophia nodded, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I just hope. I hope one day you can forgive me for keeping him from you. Lucas didn't respond immediately. The wound was still fresh, and forgiveness felt like a distant concept. But as he looked at Sophia, he saw not only the woman who had hurt him, but also the mother of his child, a woman who had made a difficult choice, however flawed. I don't know if I can, he admitted honestly, but I'll try, for him. Sophia gave a small, bittersweet smile. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The tension between Lucas and Sophia hung in the air as they navigated the delicate balance of co-parenting Ethan. Lucas, though deeply invested in his growing bond with his son, couldn't shake the lingering questions that plagued him. Why had Sophia hidden the truth? What had driven her to shut him out of Ethan's life? One evening, after Lucas spent the day with Ethan at the park, he asked Sophia to talk. They sat across from each other in her small living room, the weight of unspoken words pressing heavily between them. I need to understand, Lucas said, his voice low but resolute. I need to know why you made the decision to keep Ethan from me. Sophia folded her hands in her lap, her gaze fixed on them as if seeking strength. Lucas, it wasn't an easy choice, she began, her voice trembling slightly. When we divorced, I was so angry, so hurt by everything that had happened. I felt invisible to you, like I didn't matter. Lucas's brows furrowed. That wasn't true, Sophia. I cared about you. I still do. She looked up, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Maybe you did, but your actions told a different story. You were always at the office, always chasing the next deal, the next milestone. I felt like I was competing with your career, and I always lost. When I found out I was pregnant after the divorce, I was terrified. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought you wouldn't want the responsibility. Lucas's jaw tightened as he listened, the pain in Sophia's voice cutting through his anger. You didn't even give me the chance, he said quietly. I know, she admitted, tears spilling over now. I was wrong. I see that now. But at the time, I convinced myself I was doing the right thing, for both of us. I didn't want Ethan to grow up feeling like he wasn't a priority to you, the way I did. Lucas leaned back, exhaling slowly as he tried to process her words. He could see the fear and regret etched on her face, and though it didn't erase the pain of what she had done, it gave him a glimpse into her reasoning. I would have been there for him, Sophia, he said, his voice heavy with emotion. I would have been there for you. I'm not saying I was perfect. I know I wasn't, but I deserved to know. Sophia nodded, wiping at her cheeks. You're right. You did. And I'm sorry, Lucas. I'm so sorry. For a moment, silence filled the room. Lucas looked away, his gaze landing on a photo of Ethan smiling brightly. He felt an ache in his chest, a mixture of love for his son and grief for the years he had missed. From now on, Lucas said firmly, there will be no more secrets, no more hiding things. If we're going to do this, if we're going to raise Ethan together, we have to be honest with each other. Sophia nodded again, her expression resolute. Agreed. No more secrets. After their conversation, Lucas felt a strange mix of relief and turmoil. The truth was finally out, but it left him grappling with emotions he hadn't allowed himself to confront before. Anger, sadness, guilt, and even hope swirled within him, creating a storm he couldn't easily quiet. He threw himself into spending more time with Ethan, eager to make up for lost years. Ethan, blissfully unaware of the complexities surrounding his parents, welcomed Lucas's presence with open arms. His innocent questions, "Why weren't you here before, Dad?" pierced Lucas's heart, but he answered as honestly as he could without burdening the boy. Sophia, too, began to see a change in Lucas. He was no longer the distant, work-obsessed man she had divorced. He showed up for Ethan consistently, from helping with homework to cheering him on at soccer practice. It was clear he was determined to be the father Ethan deserved. One evening, as they all sat down for dinner at Sophia's house, something Lucas had started doing regularly, Ethan looked up from his plate with a curious expression. "Mom," he said, "did you and Dad always know I'd be this awesome?" Sophia laughed softly, reaching out to ruffle Ethan's hair. "Of course, sweetheart, we've always known." Lucas smiled, but the moment was bittersweet. He was struck again by how much he had missed. Ethan's first steps, his first words, his earliest milestones. After dinner, as Ethan ran off to play with his toys, Lucas lingered in the kitchen with Sophia. "He's amazing," Lucas said, his voice full of admiration. Sophia nodded. "He is, and he's so happy to have you in his life now." Lucas leaned against the counter, his expression somber. I just wish I'd been there from the start. I can't stop thinking about everything I missed. Sophia placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle. I can't change the past, Lucas, but I can promise you this. You're here now, and that's what matters to Ethan. He doesn't dwell on what's behind us. He only cares about what's ahead. Her words gave Lucas a sense of solace, but they also reignited his determination. He couldn't change what had happened, but he could ensure that his future with Ethan and with Sophia was built on a foundation of trust, honesty, and unwavering commitment. Lucas found himself visiting Sophia and Ethan more frequently, not only for his son, but also to mend the fractured relationship between himself and Sophia. The revelations of the past weighed heavily on them both, but they knew the only way forward was through understanding and forgiveness. One afternoon, while Ethan was at school, Lucas and Sophia sat down over coffee in her cozy kitchen. The air was calm, the winter sunlight streaming through the windows, casting soft shadows. We need to talk about us, Lucas began, his tone steady but hesitant. Sophia set her mug down and met his gaze. I know. There's so much we never said to each other. Lucas nodded, leaning forward slightly. I've spent a lot of time thinking about our past. I wasn't there for you the way I should have been. I put my career first, and I didn't realize how much that hurt you until it was too late. Sophia's eyes softened. It wasn't all your fault, Lucas. I should have spoken up sooner instead of letting the resentment build. I was afraid to seem weak, so I stayed silent when I should have told you how I felt. They fell into a deep conversation, retracing the steps of their marriage, its joys, and its failures. Lucas admitted how much he regretted not balancing his priorities, while Sophia shared her fears of inadequacy and loneliness during their time together. After the divorce, I told myself I'd never depend on anyone again, Sophia confessed. But raising Ethan on my own was harder than I ever imagined. There were times I wanted to call you, to tell you everything, but I thought it was too late. Lucas reached across the table, his hand resting over hers. It wasn't too late. I would have been there in a heartbeat, Sophia. And now, I'm here to stay. For Ethan, for you, for whatever we need to make this work. Sophia felt a flicker of hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. They had a long way to go, but for the first time, the possibility of healing didn't feel so far out of reach. As they spent more time together, Lucas and Sophia learned to communicate in ways they hadn't before. They shared their fears and dreams, their regrets and hopes. Slowly, the walls between them began to crumble, replaced by mutual respect and understanding. On a crisp spring morning, Lucas and Sophia stood together in the park where their journey had unexpectedly restarted months ago. Ethan was running ahead of them, chasing a kite that danced in the breeze. His laughter echoed, filling the space between them with warmth. Sophia glanced at Lucas, who was watching Ethan with a proud smile. He adores you, she said softly. And I adore him, Lucas replied. He turned to her, his expression earnest. I can't thank you enough for raising him into the incredible boy he is today. I'll spend the rest of my life making up for the time I missed. Sophia smiled, her heart swelling with both gratitude and affection. You're already doing it, Lucas. He knows you love him. That's all that matters. The months of co-parenting had transformed their dynamic. Lucas had fully embraced his role as a father, and he and Sophia had developed a rhythm that worked for them. While the romantic spark that once defined their relationship hadn't been rekindled, the bond they now shared was one of trust and partnership, a foundation built on the lessons they had learned from their past. As they walked through the park together, Ethan ran back toward them, his kite trailing behind. Look, Dad! Look, Mom! It's flying so high! He exclaimed, his face glowing with joy. Lucas knelt down to scoop Ethan into his arms. That's because you're the best kite flyer ever, buddy. Sophia laughed, watching them with a heart full of contentment. It wasn't the life she had imagined years ago, but it was a life she cherished, a life filled with love, growth, and possibility. Later that evening, as they sat down for dinner at Lucas's house, a tradition they had started recently, Ethan asked a question that made them both pause. Do you think we'll always be a family? He asked, his big eyes searching theirs. Sophia and Lucas exchanged a glance, their expressions softening. Of course we will, Lucas said, his voice firm but kind. No matter what, we'll always be a family. Sophia nodded, reaching out to take Ethan's hand. He's right. Family isn't just about where you live or who you're with. It's about love, and we'll always have that. As the evening went on, laughter filled the house, mingling with the clinking of plates and the sound of Ethan's excited chatter. For Lucas, Sophia, and Ethan, the park encounter that had started it all had become the foundation of something extraordinary. A new beginning that promised hope, healing, and a brighter future. Their journey wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, all three of them felt whole. In the end, Lucas, Sophia, and Ethan found their way back to one another, not through perfection, but through love, forgiveness, and the courage to start anew. The journey they had taken, from a chance encounter at a park to building a life together, was filled with challenges and revelations. Yet it was also a testament to the power of second chances and the enduring strength of family. Though their lives were not as they had once imagined, they had created something far more meaningful. A bond that was unbreakable, a love that transcended their mistakes, and a future that was theirs to shape together. As they sat together, laughing and sharing stories, they realized that the greatest gift they had given each other wasn't just a second chance. It was the promise of always being a family, no matter what. And that, above all, was the happy ending they hadn't known they were searching for. Thank you so much for listening to the entire story. We hope it touched your heart as much as it did ours. If you enjoyed this journey of love, forgiveness, and second chances, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this one. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us continue creating meaningful content for you. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thank you again, and we'll see you in the next video.